Hi, everybody. This is Mrs. Prosser. We're done with lesson 7. We're skipping lesson 8 because it's an in class activity, and we're moving on to lesson 9. It's all about sprite movement. Specifically, instead of doing this like wiggly thing we were learning last time, which is not very helpful, we are going to learn how to move a sprite from one spot to another spot. Much more helpful for games and animation. So let's get started. I'm going to skip 1 and 2. You should watch. There's not much to read here, but make sure you look at this and then watch the video. I'm going to move on to 3, where we actually dig into this complicated concept. It's called the counter pattern. Yay! It is really one of the most important patterns and kind of tools that you use in coding, in any programming language you use. So, what is it? It increases the value of a variable by 1. So basically, the variable might start with 1, then it becomes 2, then it becomes 3, then it becomes 4, and so on. It's going to keep increasing the value of the variable. So let's take a look at what that looks like in action. Down here, we have a little basic program, and it says basically figure out what it does. This is not an easy program to kind of figure out what it does. So let's take a look at this together. First off, next we have this loop. Remember, this bracket, the green bracket is a loop. It does whatever is inside of it over and over and over. So the first thing it's doing is painting a white background. Simple enough. Then it's setting the text size to counter. So the first time it runs through, counter is equal to 0. So this will be 0 the first time. Then text is going to be counter. So whatever counter is set to will be the text. So counter at position 0, 400. So down here in the corner, it's going to draw out 0, the number 0, the first time it goes through this. Now, at the bottom here, what happens? Well, counter is now turning into 1 because counter is now going to be equal to 0 plus 1. So the second time through, this is the first time through. The second time through, it repaints the background. The text size this time is set to 1. Now it's going to display the number 1 at size 1. Then it's going to, at the bottom, set the variable counter to 2 because its counter is equal to 1 plus 1. Basically, the way to think about this is by doing this, by setting this thing up, this is going to increase counter by 1 each time the loop happens. So it's going to keep increasing that number. In this case, you have to kind of think about what that would do to what it's displaying. So think about that and write your answer. I'm going to move on, though, to talk about bigger and better things. Let's take a look at this in action. And obviously, if you haven't figured this out already, maybe it's not obvious, if you change the plus 1 to something else, let's say you change it to plus 5, then this would run through. The first time counter would turn into 5, then the next time counter would turn into 10, and then 15, and then 20. So you can make the number go up much faster. Now you're probably thinking, why do I want a number that increases? Well, let's take a look at how you would actually use that. I'm going to sneeze. All right. Let me try that again. Post sneeze. Let's go ahead and look at how you might actually use that. Oh no, I don't want the eraser tool. No. 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 Hold on. Okay, so what do we actually do with this? Let's take a look. If I move on to 4, this is going to show us, okay, how do you actually make this into movement? So if we take a look here, there's the little plane flying. We want it to fly from the left to the right. So let's take a look at how you would use this counter pattern to do that. Well, first, it says, using the counter pattern, you can write programs that animate sprites smoothly. Adding to or removing from a sprite's X or Y property in the draw loop makes your sprite move just a bit each time it's drawn. So let's try out how you would actually do this. First off, what's changing here? Is it the X or the Y? You should be thinking it's staying this, one thing's staying the same, one thing's changing. In this case, it's the X that's changing. So we want each time the loop goes for the X position to increase, so it slowly creeps across the screen. Now, if I just said I want it to increase by 1 plus 1, for example, well, it's actually not going to change because I'm telling it the plane's X is equal to 2 over and over and over. So the trickiest part of this is you have to tell it you want it to add 1 to the current position. And the current position is plane.x. So in this case, I grab sprite.x, stick it in there. Now our sprite's name is plane, type in plane. So here, what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, the new position is going to be the original position plus 1. I'm adding 1 to the original X position. So now the new X position is going to be plus 1. Now if I do this, you'll see it will move. Now it's a little more fun if you start playing with this. So what if you make it plus 5? It's going to go a lot faster. If you did plus 20, it's going to like fly across the screen. So you can play with different numbers and that will change the speed. Now, for this, you don't need to do this, but you would also, let's say you want to change the Y instead. I could stick sprite Y is equal to sprite Y plus 1. And what's going to happen is, oh, it's not happy. Oh, because I forgot it's not called sprite, it's called plane. I try to go too fast, and then I make mistakes, as I'm sure you do too. And now we'll see it's going to slowly increase the Y position instead of the X. I could do both, and it would go diagonally. So those are all things to think about. The key is this is your golden code that you're going to be playing with. This increases the Y in this case, or if you had the .x, that's changing the X coordinate. And you're using this plus 1 to keep increasing the value. Let me go to something else. Let's see. This one is about making it move faster. You can play with that. We just kind of talked about that. But the key here is I think some of you might not know how to get the math stuff in. So what you'd want to do is you'd go to sprites and say, okay, I want to play with sprite X. I want to set the sprite's X position. It's not sprite X, it's the sprite's X position. In this case, it'd be flies. So let's say I wanted the flies X position to be, again, if you just set it to a stable value, it's just going to stay there. It's not going to move. So you've got to change it so that every time the loop runs, it's going to change. In this case, let's say we'd go to math, and we could do here, we could add this in. And this is a math bracket. This is adding. It has a plus sign. You're going to add 2 numbers. Again, if I just put numbers in here, it's not going to change every time. So I have to go in here and add as the first, that's not what I want. Add as the first number. First number I want it to have is the current position plus 1. Now, let's see what happens. Oh, he's going the wrong way. I want him to fly left. So you think about which of these would help you do that. You don't have to use the plus. You can use a different one. It's the same thing. You still put that fly.x, but then Maybe you use minus or divided by or multiply. Most of the time with a counter, you're using plus or minus. So think about that, play with that, and see if you can speed your fly up. Moving on. This one's kind of cool. My tip to you as you play with this and choose which one you think it is take a look at one car. Focus on one of the cars and see if you can figure out what position it's starting at and then what position it's ending at. And you'll kind of get that. All right, let's go to diagonal movement. I already talked about this a little bit, but you can change the Y and the X at the same time by having, again, the Y in here changing, or the X in here changing. Let me try that again. You could have the X in here changing too. So try playing with that. That's kind of fun to see if you can figure out how to make it go in different directions. Here on part 8, it's showing you kind of different ways to do this. You can add, you can have things add diagonally. You can also have things rotate or increase in size or even stretch out using different counter patterns. And you're just using them instead of with dot X, you can use dot rotation or dot scale. Anyway, stuff to look at because you're going to practice some of that in lesson 9.9. This one you play with rotation. Same thing. It's just you're setting this rotation position is equal to the current rotation position plus 1. And then it will keep changing that rotation position each time it runs the loop and redraws. Then let's see. I think you get into, which one was this again? Figure out what's wrong with it. There's watching things, or they're called watchers down here. And when you run the program, these will change. And what you can use these for is to see, okay, which one is having the problem. So like in this, you probably want X to increase because it's going to the right. And Y, you probably want it to decrease because it's going up. So you'd want to see, watching this, all right, is the X going up and the Y going down or not? That can help you figure out where your problems are. With this, it's adjusting the speed. So you have all 3 fish drawn, and they're going to go at different speeds across the screen. And remember, to do that, you change what number you have here. So a larger number is going to make it go faster. A smaller number will make it go slower. And, this one's fun. This one, you have to figure out which direction you want to rotate them. Because remember, positive will, if you change the rotation in a positive way, it's going to rotate clockwise. If you change it negatively, it will rotate counterclockwise. So basically, you have to think about this. Okay, this one's going clockwise, the blue one's going counterclockwise, and the green one's going clockwise. So this one's a little challenging, but again, remember, you're using the rotation, and you're going to have it redraw these over and over with that same math thing where some of them will be added, and then some of them will be subtracted. So you're going to be doing this for each of the sprites. You have 3 sprites, the green gear, the blue gear, and the red gear. So basically you're going to set this up 3 times, and you have to kind of figure out what math am I using and what numbers do I use. It looks like they're all going at the same speed, so you probably don't need a different number here. But because they're not all going the same direction, you're not going to use the same math. Remember, clockwise is positive, counterclockwise is negative. Let's move on. I'm going to skip over to 14. This is where you'd make your own animation. This actually doesn't follow one of the old projects, but this is where you draw background. You would update properties using the counter pattern. And of course, up here, you need to set up your sprites. So what sprites do you want to have? What animation, or what image should they each use? And then draw the sprites. So I'm going to let you play with this because I've kind of walked through everything else. And then you'll also see this. This is where you add movement, which doesn't really make sense because it already told you where to put the movement. Basically, 14 and 15 are the same things, but it's saying, okay, in this one, first do this stuff. The second one in 15 is where you're actually supposed to be doing this counter pattern part. So the counter pattern, that is where you're setting up the change. So it changes position. You can do whatever you want with this. Make a plain fly across the screen from scratch. But remember, all your animations are over here. You can use anything. I would say just pick something that you want to try moving across the screen. Maybe two things. But play with it. Have fun with this. And I'll look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. And I'll be definitely looking at your lesson 15 or lesson 9 part 15s and giving you some feedback on that at the end of, well, on next Monday. So take care, everybody. I hope this was helpful. And remember, the counter pattern is all about increasing a variable a set amount over and over and over. It's just a pattern. It's increasing or it can decrease. Remember, you can also use subtraction. So play with it, have fun with it, enjoy, and experiment. The more you try this out, the easier it's going to get. So hang in there. Take care.